Hello and welcome to Sage Advice, Superhumans, and Storytelling, a little podcast video series that we've developed for high school seniors preparing to enter the adult world, where we interview experts who have been there and done that and who are out making their marks on the world right now. All right, so our next guest on this fun little podcast deal is Keith Sabin. Keith is a postdoctoral researcher at, how do you pronounce it? Stowers? Stowers Institute for Medical Research in Kansas City, Missouri. Dr. Sabin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's still weird to hear people call me that because I don't feel like a doctor. I still feel like a grad student.
To give people a little background, Dr. Sabin here is a fellow NMU Wildcat, and that's where I met him. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your background.
Yeah, so I grew up in Grand Rapids initially, but my dad and his family are from Marquette, and so I went up there a lot, which is kind of how I got familiar with NMU. And so I decided to go there, not really having any clue what I wanted to do. I was broadly interested in science, but beyond that, I don't know, it was kind of a big black box.
So you decided because your family was up here. Did you have any other options, or were you just like, no, Northern, that's it, I love that place, that's what I want?
Yeah, so I did also apply to Michigan State University, and they have a special like natural science institute for undergrads called Lyman Briggs. And so I was accepted into Lyman Briggs, but Michigan State is huge with a big party culture. And I figured that I would have probably kind of fell through the cracks a lot easier if I went to Michigan State. There would have been a lot more distractions. And so then I just decided that Northern was a better fit for me because of the UP is gorgeous. I have a lot of family up there, and it was just kind of a smaller, more intimate, community-based feel, which is what I was looking for.
Yeah, I think it's important that you bring up what you said about, MSU being such a huge culture, party culture, everything else. I know a lot of kids sometimes think, as you're graduating high school, you got to go to the biggest and best universities to get the PhD and to do this, that, and the other thing, obviously. But I mean, I'm sure you would probably second this, that at the end of the day, it's really not about that. You still have the same opportunities. And obviously, with Northern, where everybody makes the joke where the N stands for knowledge, we got the same level of education as anybody else would have, but a much smaller field, which I agree. I liked that as well about Northern. Do you feel like Northern held you back from anything at all in pursuing?
No. Definitely not. Sorry. Just to like reiterate what you said, I actually think that I got a better education and had a more well-rounded experience because I went to Northern.
Awesome.
Specifically, since Michigan State is so large, kind of the competition to get in on research with other faculty members, or like to be a part of student organizations or student groups, it's a lot harder maybe to do that at Michigan State.
Northern is such a unique experience too. I don't think most people can say that they've had the experiences that we've had going there.
Definitely.
And I'm not just because it's our local.
Well, no, you
university, but
yeah. No, you totally should. Northern's awesome. This could turn into like a promotional video.
Yeah.
But having said that, like one thing that I really do love about Northern, and this is just, I guess, from my experience personally, is going to be more tailored towards science and biology.
Yeah, for sure.
What I did when I got to school. But and even like I did my PhD at the University of Minnesota, which is also a very large university, kind of similar to Michigan State. And a lot of the undergrads there, their lecture courses don't actually have labs.
Really?
So that a lot of the things that I did as a part of all of my courses at Northern, they all had lab sections, and so we all got to do some of the more technical lab-based things as a part of our normal um, coursework. But then when I was at the University of Minnesota, I would mentor undergrads in the lab that had never done some of the basic things that was just commonplace at Northern, and that would be commonplace if you went to like a smaller, kind of more community-based school, which I
Yeah,
think is a huge benefit to students that want to pursue that like as a career or something. Just
for
to
sure.
reiterate something that you said also, so one thing that I've noticed now looking back is that where you do your undergrad isn't as important as maybe some people think it is.
Yeah,
What's most important is what you get out of it and the experiences that you get from that. And so, for example, like I went to Northern Michigan, which, is not maybe nationally a well-known school, but right now, like the institute that I'm at is internationally renowned for the research that it's doing. And so, you don't need to go to Harvard or Yale or some Ivy League school or University of Michigan in order to be, end up in a successful, successful kind of position.
yes, yes.
And so
The air
that,
quotes of,
yeah, there's a lot of different interpretations on what success means. And I think it's different for each person based on your own personal goals and what you want to prioritize in your life.
society kind of puts pressure on a certain definition of success. But I feel like once you unlock that understanding that success can literally be whatever you want it to be, happiness goes up, actual, benefits of that success goes up. And I think that's a really cool understanding to share and make sure that they have.
Yep.
Um, so, you know, where you're at now, tell us a little bit about what you do now. You went through Northern, now you're a postdoctoral researcher, pretty big deal to get your doctorate in general. Tell us about kind of how you got there, what's been challenging about it, what's been fun or easy about it for you, maybe some failures.
I guess I'll start off by saying, so like, no, very few high schoolers sit in class and ever imagine, like, what I want to be when I grow up? I want to work in a lab all day and stare at beakers down a microscope. And so, like, I certainly didn't start this journey thinking that this is where I was going to end up. I do know that I was, generally interested in science. And actually, so this is like super nerdy. When I was in kindergarten, Jurassic Park was my favorite movie. And
Yes.
so I wanted to be a paleontologist for a long time. And
Yes.
then when I was in second grade, I became obsessed with the movie Jaws. And so then I wanted to be a marine biologist for a really long time. Uh, and so I've always kind of been interested in this sort of stuff. So like a certain amount of nerddom is just
Yeah.
built into it,
Yes.
or into me. But actually, when I went to Northern initially, I wanted to study ecology because I was really interested in I wanted to work with animals and I didn't want to be a vet. I wanted to study animals like in the forest and figure out stuff about them. But then I took ecology and I got a D. I did really, really bad
Oh,
in ecology, partly because it wasn't interesting. They talked
right.
about trees a lot and I didn't care about forests. Not that they're not important. I'm just like, dude,
Right.
it's a tree. Like, I want to talk about charismatic megafauna.
Oh my God.
I know there's your 5-syllable Scrabble word for the day. Um, so anyway, I learned out real quickly that I wasn't going to be an ecologist. That's not going to happen. And so then the next semester, a little bit disheartened because in high school I was not a great student, but I got mostly B's. I'd never gotten a D before, so it was like, well, what am I doing? This is kind of
Yeah.
what am I gonna do? I took arguably one of the driest biology courses you can take, which is human anatomy.
Oh gosh.
yeah, human anatomy is just like memorizing all these Latin terms of things that haven't changed in the last, 1,000 years. And I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. I loved learning about all of the different parts of the human body and how they're
Yeah.
put together to ultimately give you, like a function.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what really, I think, kind of changed my path to going more along like the human biological sciences.
For sure.
So then the next semester I took human physiology, which is learning how your body works. So how do all of the organ systems um, come together to tell you you're hungry and then allow you to eat food, digest that food, and then poop that food out when you're done with it. And so that was really cool. And I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. This is something that, and the class was at 8 a.m., which I am not a morning person,
Yeah.
especially back then. And so the fact that I
Like
got
this
out of bed
couch.
for it was, yeah, and so that really kind of cemented for me that, yeah, this is the right field. But then it's like, well, what do I do with this? Like these courses are really cool, but I'm at college paying all of this money,
Yeah.
trying to figure out what I want to do with my life when I get done with it. And I had no idea. So then obviously like the low hanging fruit was, well, I guess I'll go to medical school and become a medical doctor. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's, my 20-year-old self. That's just kind of how I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was pre-med for like a semester or something, and then was like, no, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I was still really interested in biology classes, and so I wanted to keep going with that. And Northern is a phenomenal school if you're interested in education,
Yeah.
which Maria knows.
Yes.
And so
Absolutely.
I was like, well, okay, like one of the formative teachers in my life was my biology teacher, and I generally enjoy talking about science and teaching other people about it. So maybe this could be for me. And so I changed to education and continued taking biology courses. But then I just got more and more nerdy about the classes I was going to take. And so like I was really, really looking forward to this class called endocrinology. Like who does that?
No.
It's not something that anyone should
No.
ever get jazzed about. But I was, and it was a class that I didn't have to take for the education degree. And I also didn't have to take a lot of upper level like molecular biology courses or developmental biology courses. And these are all things I wanted to learn about.
Right.
And so at that point I was kind of like, well, maybe education isn't for me and I should just stick to biology. But if I do that, I pretty much have to do research.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what that meant. It was this super ambiguous, like vague term.
Right.
And all
In school we learned that we associate the term research with your teacher is going to assign you a paper. You're going to look on the interwebs for it. You're going to avoid Wikipedia because naughty. And that, I mean, yeah, what even is that, right? It's such a broad term. So how'd that shape out then once you figured that out?
Yeah, so I luckily, there was a research lab at Northern who was doing research on brain tumors
Oh,
and how they form and how they progress. And I initially went and talked to the professor who told me that they did not have room for me at the time in their lab. And so, but he told me to check back with him. And so I think he meant like the next semester, but
mm-hmm.
it was like 3 weeks later and I was back in his office like, hey, do you have something for me to do? And so I literally kept annoying him like every other week. And I think he finally just took pity on me and also was annoyed that I kept bothering him and allowed me to do research in his lab, first working with a current graduate student. And then eventually I was able to work on my own individual undergraduate research project.
Sweet.
Um, and so that's one thing that I kind of learned from that experience is that no one's going to give you anything.
Yeah.
And that if you're really interested in an opportunity, be it, academically or in your personal or professional life, you really need to be your own advocate. And persistence is key.
Love
And
that.
just because you're rejected initially, it doesn't mean you should give up, but just you know, keep trying for it, because something eventually probably will work out.
Do you enjoy your place right now, your position, and what you're
I
doing?
do. Yeah. So just to kind of finish up, and I'll fast track it this time because that was kind of a long-winded story. So yeah, I did. I got into the lab. I decided I loved research. I ended up doing my master's thesis there. I studied how brain tumors can actually turn off a patient's immune system. And so in that way, the tumor can kind of escape the immune system so that your immune defenses don't kill it. So then, yeah, after that, I decided I loved research. It was great. I kind of learned what it was. And then I applied for PhD programs. There were two in California, one in Madison, Michigan State again, and then University of Minnesota. And I ended up at the University of Minnesota.
Awesome.
And I loved it. It was great.
Yeah.
Grad school is really cool. It was a phenomenal experience, but also the hardest part about grad school is grad school. It's like mentally and emotionally draining at times, and it can be really, really tough. But it's something, you know, if it's in a field that you love and something you're interested in, um, I think it's definitely worthwhile. And I also wanted to mention, people, I think, kind of had this conception of, or misconception of, you know, people with advanced degrees is that they're like really super smart. And that's not always the case. A lot of times it's just those people might tend to work really hard at something. And like, so for example, like when I was an undergrad, I took physics and organic chemistry, 2 semesters or a semester, 2 semesters of each. And I got C's and C minuses in all of them.
Yeah,
And
those are
it's
tough
still
courses.
possible to, yeah, and I didn't find them particularly interesting. I mean, I wasn't going to be an engineer, and I'm not a chemist, and they're really hard classes. And
Yeah,
so it's, you know, you don't need to be a stellar student in order to achieve your goals. Again, it's just, I guess, a point that I'm trying to make.
now let's go back to the Keith Sabin graduating high school. Were you 18 when you graduated?
I was,
Okay,
yeah.
18-year-old high school student ready to graduate, and you're like, all right, going to Northern. What advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now? That little 18-year-old guy, what would you tell him?
Um, I think I already said a lot of what I would have told him, in that uh, it's really hard to spiral in the face of adversity. So
Yeah,
like if things don't go how you plan, um, you know, it's really hard to pick yourself up after that. And that's totally normal, and it's okay to fail. I think
yeah,
that's probably what I would tell myself, is that it's okay to fail as long as you just keep trying. I
absolutely.
think I think that's pretty key. Especially like that's one thing I've definitely learned being in science, is 90% of what I do is failure. Uh, you know, we watch like Frankenstein movies, and Dr. Frankenstein's like having this big aha moment, and there's lightning in the background, and I was like, that's what mad scientists do. And yeah, and it's not so much. It's like whenever I get a result, it's usually after at least 3 months of failing. And then when I get it, it either like confirms what I already thought, or it refutes that. And then it's kind of cool to be able to sit down and think about, well, this isn't consistent with what I originally thought. So what else might be going on, and how could I approach it differently to try to figure out what is actually happening?
Yeah,
Which isn't something that an 18-year-old would think about at all, but that's what
no.
30-year-old me thinks about now. Uh,
Cool. Well,
um,
any last thoughts from the doctor?
that pretty much sums it up. I do want to reiterate, especially in the current climate. So while people with advanced degrees aren't necessarily geniuses, they are 100% experts in their field.
Yes.
And their thoughts and opinions are way more valid on certain topics than your typical, I don't know, online troll or
Yes,
other
thank
people
you.
that aren't qualified to have, you know, or promote certain opinions.
Yes.
And so I didn't want those two ideas to get mixed up.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome
Yep. And then
thought.
also kind of to piggyback onto that, the loudest people don't always know the most. And so, like, one thing that I experienced in my anatomy lab is I definitely felt a lot of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
because I was a freshman taking the 200 level course. And so I was convinced that everyone there knew that I was a freshman and that I didn't belong and that I wasn't smart enough to be there. And so there was one student in particular who was very vocal about, you know, pointing out all of the structures on the anatomy models and whatever else. And I was like, man, that kid, he's super smart. Like he's, you know, I'm looking back at it now, and you know, he was just the most vocal. It was also the second time he took the class, which means the first time he took it, if you retake a class, generally you didn't do well the first time.
Turns out
And
you probably didn't do
so,
well.
yeah, imagine that, right? Um, and so, yeah, so I think that's just something to keep in mind also, that just because someone is the loudest or because someone does seem knowledgeable, it doesn't mean that they are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so something else that I've thought about before also is that, yes, everybody has an opinion, and even young people, like, your thoughts matter. You have a thought and it matters. And I think it's really important to vocalize your thoughts and opinions with the understanding that it's okay to be wrong. It is
Absolutely.
completely fine to be wrong. And in most instances, I learn most when I am wrong, because then I have these conversations and these discussions with people that have thought about something a little differently than I have, or they have different life experiences than I have. And so they can give me a unique perspective that I wouldn't have had if I wouldn't have voiced my initial opinions.
Yeah.
But then it's really important to take what you learn and take what you hear from other people, incorporate that into your own life history, basically, and then change your ideas and continue to evolve as a person. And
Absolutely.
so if you blatantly hear facts and you choose not to believe them because they conflict with your current ideologies or like how you currently view the world, I think that's where a lot of problems can come from.
For sure.
is
Absolutely.
is the inability to change,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Change is important. We fear it, but it is probably one of the most necessary parts of life.
Definitely, I
For
agree.
sure.
I don't know, maybe that was a little too meta, but
We're
I'm
getting
just,
deep here.
yeah, I know.
In
I mean, I think it is.
times of strife we get the the deep philosophical
Oh
moments.
yeah, I've just been, sitting in my apartment for like the last 6 weeks just thinking. So this is, I mean, luckily, well, yeah, anyway, so yeah, it's great.
It's great conversation with humans. And it'll be entertaining when I probably continue to use these interviews in the future, and we're talking about these things like we're all going insane. Everybody will be able to relate, so it's fine.
Yeah,
It's
it's
totally fine.
totally fine.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to hang out for a little bit and tell us your stories and give us a good little, I guess, look into your experiences as somebody who is now, again, a postdoctoral researcher. You started at Northern, where the N stands for awesome knowledge,
Yep.
and taking away not only that kind of stereotype of Northern, but also just I like that valuable lesson of you don't have to be the smartest or the loudest in the room to achieve and be very successful. So yeah, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Dr.
my pleasure.
Sabin.